So today's webinar it could change your life. I hope it does. It's really about an extremely important topic and one that I would estimate that 90% of all attorneys out there don't understand. And the reason they don't understand it is because they don't understand really the level of performance that you need to apply if you're going to be extremely successful as an attorney. Most attorneys, probably 80% of them, are not living up to anywhere near their full potential, and others are. And I'm going to teach you today about what the performance mindset that you need to have in order to succeed, and also what you're probably doing wrong, because most attorneys are. You may not know this, but I do performance coaching with attorneys. And when I do that, I meet with them twice a month and charge $5,000 for like 90-minute consultations. And what I'm going to cover today is a lot of what I do to coach people. And right now I have, I don't know, 6 or 7 clients, and I go through this sort of information with them, and it helps them really get much more successful. It takes people from having like $1 or $2 million of business to like 10. It takes people that are associates in law firms that are willing to pay for it, which isn't a lot, to becoming partners and doing all sorts of things that you're capable of if you understand the performance mindset that I'm going to talk about today. So I think this is an extremely important webinar. I would recommend taking notes. I would recommend being focused, because if you understand what I'm going to talk about to you today, it's going to make a major difference in how successful you are and what your future looks like for yourself and for your family. So absorb this information. It's not easy information to hear. You may not want to hear it. A lot of people are afraid to hear this sorts of information, but when you hear it, it's going to change your entire outlook about your legal career. So, each year, I don't know what the number is. I mean, it's over 30,000 people. They go to law school, and they believe when they go to law school that they're going to have a really good legal career. Many go to, the minority of them, go to top 10 law schools and things like that, or top 15 law schools, and they assume that their future is secure, either at a top law firm or in the legal profession. And even if they did go to a top law school, I would say that probably 90% of those attorneys don't ever come close to reaching their full potential. And then you have attorneys that didn't go to top law schools, that even went to unaccredited law schools. And they often have much better careers than people that went to the top law schools, because they absorb and understand naturally or on their own what I'm going to talk about today. And it doesn't matter how your grades are in law school right now. It doesn't matter what where you're at in your career right now. If you understand this information and you understand how serious it is and you absorb it, you'll do very well. Most attorneys that go to law school don't come anywhere close to reaching their full potential. And what's important to understand about the legal profession is it's extremely competitive. There are more lawyers than there is work. There are so many people that are coming out of law school and so many attorneys out there competing for work, whether it's getting clients and so forth, that very few people succeed. Students from these who are top law schools, the elite firms, very few of them rise to the top. If you go to a major law firm and you're in a class of 50 people when you start, maybe 1 or 2 of those people will become partners, some more, but usually something around that, and sometimes not even that amount. And when you think about your career, you're going to discover why being good isn't enough. Most people, law students and attorneys, will never reach anywhere near the level of success that they believe that they're going to have when they go to law school, and even when they get out of law school. And attorneys that are currently practicing are probably way below the level of success that they need in order to succeed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the mindset of law students. It's applicable to all attorneys, but I'm trying to show people like how competitive things are when you start, and then I'll also talk about how competitive things are when you're getting out. So I used to give lots of talks at law schools. I would go to law schools, UCLA, I would go to Harvard, I've got all these different law schools, and I would give speeches. And several years ago, I remember I was giving a speech at a law school. I think it's probably ranked number 25 in the country. I was the only speaker, and about maybe 100 people showed up to watch me speak. I think it was at USC. And at the time, the legal market in the US was doing well. It was a very robust legal market. And because of that, lots of people were going to applying to law school, and a much higher percentage than now were getting jobs in, good firms. But as I looked at these kids in the audience, I saw a level of arrogance. Like a lot of people were, sitting back in their chairs and just kind of grimacing, and a lot of them appeared, very confident, like anything I was saying didn't really matter. And they felt like they were at this top 25 law school. The legal market was good. They were going to do very well and they didn't need to worry. And I knew that the opposite of that was true, despite the fact that they were going, to a top 25 law school. Probably only 20% of them would be getting jobs at the most prestigious firms. So a lot of them were first year students, second year students, and kind of assumed that they would be getting jobs. And out of that 20%, I also knew that only a very small percentage of those attorneys would be at these firms for more than a few years. And so regardless of the state of the legal market, when I was talking to these people, I knew that most of them weren't going to do well, even though they thought they were, even though they had a lot of confidence. I knew that for most of them, their careers were nowhere near, what they could expect. And I gave this talk, and I think that as I gave it, people were very uncomfortable. And I talked about this to them, even though I was just going to give another type of speech. And the law school was even upset with me. And the director of career services came up and said, you shouldn't have scared these kids and so forth. Law schools often want people to think very positively about their degrees and what they're getting. But I knew that for most of these people, the prospects weren't pretty. And it doesn't matter where you went to law school. You could go to Harvard. It doesn't matter. Most people come out with a wrong mindset, not really understanding how extremely competitive the legal market is, and how in order to succeed, you need to have a very strong goal-centered mindset. And you need to realize that the legal profession does only awards the extraordinary. It only awards the extraordinary because there are so many people out there competing for the best jobs. There are so many people out there competing to get work from clients. There's just an incredible amount of competition. So if you're competing for these jobs and you're competing for all this sort of stuff, you need to realize that you're only going to get where you want to go. And if you're extraordinary, why would law firms that have multiple applications for jobs, for the best jobs, why would they reward ordinary performance? Why would a client that needs someone to go to work for them, to help them in a major legal matter that could be worth millions or tens of millions of dollars, why would they want someone that's average helping them? Why would you want someone that's average helping you if you had some deadly disease, some horrible bacteria running through your body? Would you want to have like your local general practitioner helping you, or would you want to have someone that was an expert on these infectious diseases? Because if you didn't have an expert like that, you would die. Well, clients are the same way. They want to have someone that's absolutely extraordinary. They don't want to have average. They want to have people that are passionate, that know what they're going to know what they do, that are really, focused and are willing to go to the mat for them and are hungry and all these sorts of things. And that's what you need to have if you're going to do well. And in your life, by the way, unless you're truly extraordinary, meaning you have to be very, very good at something, you're not going to get big rewards. It doesn't matter what you do. You have to be extraordinary. You have to be better than average. It's interesting. Like I remember I used to live in New York City, and there was like a 1 mile walk I would take, a little bit more than half a mile, when I would get off the subway, walk home. And, I watched for years restaurants opening and closing, usually within about 6 months. You would go in there and they would seem like they're doing well, but then very quickly they wouldn't. And because in restaurants, in order to survive in New York, you need to be extraordinary at whatever you do. The rent's high, so the market pushes out people that aren't extraordinary. In a market like New York City, when you're working in law firms that are very, very competitive, and there's a lot of attorneys trying to work there, only extraordinary people get in and extraordinary people stay. So if you're going to succeed at anything in your life, you need to be the absolute best at what you do. You need to have every ounce of your energy and talent focused on doing something. Now, I'm going to be very clear with you. It doesn't matter how smart you are. Like you may have gone to like a bad law school and done badly there. It doesn't matter, how good you are. You have to be extraordinary at something. I've seen attorneys graduate from law school and without bad grades. And I know one that set up a trust and estates practice where I live in Malibu. And 3 years later, he was able to buy a $5 million house because he got very, very good at what he was doing. And it just had put all his passion into it, helping clients and getting referrals. So you can be very, very successful regardless of who you think you are, but you have to be the best at what you do. I mean, you can be average and above average and get along just fine if that's what you want to do. But if you do that, you just have to be aware that nothing good is going to happen that you want. I remember one of the most difficult letters that I ever received. I was in seventh grade, and after seventh grade, I took a trip to Spain for like this. I took a trip to Spain with this group of people to learn Spanish, do other things, and my grades came out while I was gone. And I got in seventh grade, I got mainly C's, pretty much all C's. And my dad wrote me a letter, and he's like, you can do your life like this, but if you do your life like this, nothing good's ever going to happen to you. You're going to just be, you're not going to get a good college. You're going to have a low level of motivation. People are going to pick up on that, and you will get jobs that require a low level of motivation and don't require you to be very, very good. And he was right. And it was a very difficult letter. I'll never forget it. But that's how it works. Unless you're really good at something, then you're probably not going to get ahead. You need to be extraordinary. And that's where the highest rewards go. They go to people that are extraordinary. And it's more than being just gifted. It's about being the best person for the job or for your practice area or for clients when they see you. And that's what you need to look like. And so think about that. What are you doing right now? Are you just being average? I'm pretty sure, you are probably leaning towards that. If you're on this webinar, then you're learning. And very few attorneys like you are learning, or law students are learning. And this is the kind of stuff that can make you extraordinary when you start learning about these things. And if you're gifted in something, then you need to keep pushing yourself to do better and better. Everybody's gifted at something, by the way. I have yet to meet a person in the entire world that doesn't have some sort of skill where they're extremely gifted, where they have this level of passion for something, or they have some sort of skill that is extraordinary. And everybody does. I don't know what yours is. It could be interpersonal communications. It could be writing. It could be science. It could be all sorts of things, but everyone has something. I don't know what yours is that makes them very, very good. It could be tons of things, but you only become really extraordinary with whatever your natural gifts are when you push yourself and develop every single muscle you need to be successful. You need to do that. So I got into law school because I was very good at writing. Like I would take a class and I would be like the only A in the class, and I just had the ability to analyze things in that way in college, and it made me very successful. I was, just because I had that ability, but I didn't sit around and take, math and science classes. That would have been dumb. I decided I would develop my skill doing that, and then I got better and better and better because I was focused on something. And so you only become extraordinary when you push and you develop everything that you got in order to be successful. And you could do it in law school to some extent. If you take classes you're good at, you could do it not practicing law, doing something else. But what is it that you're really good at? Because I will guarantee you 100%, if I were to spend just half an hour to an hour with you, I would very quickly pick up on what you're good at. And that may be practicing law, it may be something else. But if you're really good at something, you're going to be successful. It could be being an artist and singing. It could be, I don't know. I remember when I was about 13 or 14, and I had this friend, and we were riding by this music shop, and he stopped in there and he started playing the drums. And it was like the most incredible thing I've ever seen, like how every ounce of energy like went into it, and he was just unbelievable. And it was like a music room, and there was a huge crowd of people like that formed, like just standing around this guy watching him. And he was incredibly gifted. He wasn't good in school. He wasn't good with friends and things. And he ended up starting this band called the New Radicals when he was like 21. And I think they sang that song, "You Only Give What You Give," or something. I don't remember. But then he didn't like having this very successful band and touring. So now he writes all these songs for people like Britney Spears and stuff. He had this incredible gift. But I never would have known it. And that he was someone that was gifted. And most people have something. If you probe down your psychology and what you makes you happy and stuff, you have something. And if you apply that and you keep building that, you're going to do better and better. So instead of this, like I talked about this speech, I decided I would be better off, giving these students a serious prep talk. And I knew that most of them would never be successful. I hope you look at all your law school classmates, if you're in law school or when you graduate, and look back on them, and you will see that most of them are not where they should be. Some people lose their passion very early in law school, like right when they get the grades. Others don't. They know that they have to be extraordinary. When I was in law school, my first semester grades, I got like a C, C plus, B minus, and a B. And I knew that with those grades, I would never get into a top law school if I continued doing that. So the next semester, I made sure that I studied all the time. If I got out of classes at 3, I would study till like 11 or 12. And I just decided I didn't want to be average. I didn't want to get an average job. And the next semester, I got almost all A's and 1 B plus because I realized that I had to be extraordinary if I was going to get ahead. Everybody does that. I mean, you need to, if you're not extraordinary, you're not going in that direction, you need to figure out how you can be, because it's the most important thing. So all these kids thought they would get good jobs at a large law firm. And again, most of them never would. And the ones that did would most likely not succeed. So how do you succeed in the legal profession? You need to be extraordinary. You cannot be average, or you cannot even be good. That's not enough. Law firms, the best law firms are, or they're an animal basically, and a strong animal doesn't want to surround itself with weak animals. People want to surround themselves at a high level with the very best people, and so that's what you need to be. You need to be the hardest worker. You need to do the best work quality. You need to be the best at developing clients, because if you're average, nothing positive is going to happen to you. So, the difference between extraordinary and ordinary often is just putting your efforts into something that you're better than anybody else in. It could be writing briefs, it could be whatever, trials. I mean, it doesn't matter, but you need to figure out what you can be extraordinary in, because if you're average, then you're going to get average results. So I gave these kids, told them that they need to be extraordinary. I told them that most of them, might think they succeed and never would. Why do people not succeed? Many times they go into firms and they think that the firms are blessed to have them because they have really, really good grades in law school, and then they've made it there. And so they can stop working really hard, or they look at the law firm as an employer. So if you look at the law firm as an employer, then you're always calculating, am I getting the biggest bonus? Am I getting this? And am I getting that? They don't look at it as a place where they can learn and advance if they do the best work and if they work hardest and if they are on the side of the employer. Law firms kick out people that aren't on their side. So if you're part of a group of people that's negative or thinks badly about the people you're working with, then you'll show it and you will be expelled like a virus. Law firms expel people like a virus. When people leave law firms, most of the time, the law firm is pushing them out because they're not rising to the level that the law firm wants. And the person may not even understand why they're not rising to the level, because they're not working hard enough, or they're not improving, or they're not, learning from the best people. They're not doing things right. And so, if that's who you are, then you need to think about, am I going to go to the next level, and am I going to be the best about the people that I'm around? If you're extraordinary, by the way, people remember you. They remember how extraordinary you were. They tell people. Your brand becomes very strong. It doesn't matter if you leave a firm. You leave a firm, and people in the firm remember you, and they think of you, and they want to work with you. And when I left the practice of law, like I was practicing law, and I decided that I needed to be extraordinary when I got into firms. So I worked the hardest. I took things much more seriously than other people. I was able to bring in business because people remember when I was younger and how hard I pushed and things. And so, I wasn't probably even nearly as extraordinary as I needed to be, but I was good and very good. And, when I left for years, I got calls from people that were starting their own practices and wanted to be my partner. I mean, other associates I'd worked with, and they did that because they wanted to surround themselves with good people. So if you're average, you're probably not going to get the best job possible. If you're good, you're probably not going to get the best jobs. You will be at smaller firms. If you start at smaller firms, you can always learn to be extraordinary later. I've seen people become extraordinary after having 15 years of practice and just learning from all their mistakes and suddenly absorbing all that and being very good. I mean, you need to be extraordinary. There's all sorts of things too that are important for being extraordinary. And what are those things? Like, who are you surrounding yourself with? Are you surrounding yourself with people that are trying to be extraordinary as well and picking up on the things that they do and learning from them? One of the reasons that people go to schools like Harvard and want to go there for college is not because they're, not because you're going to learn anything different at Harvard. I mean, you might learn some different stuff, but because you're going to be surrounded with people that have major goals, that want to do major things in their lives, and surrounding yourself with those people is going to rub off on you, and you're going to become like them. So, who are you surrounding yourself with? In your interpersonal relationships, are you around people that are trying hard and make you feel good about yourself? Are you around people that don't make you feel good about yourself? Are you around people that are draining your energy so you don't have energy to apply to your job and your firm? One of the largest, sources of failure, I've read these articles about psychology, is when you get a spouse or a significant other that is draining on you, that they're taking away your positive energy and you're not able to do your best. And so you're surrounded by these thoughts and these negative things that are rubbing off on you all day, and you never reach your full potential. Maybe the person doesn't believe in you and tells you that, and you become less than you can be. So is your spouse like that? Your significant other? Are your friends like that? Like, who are you surrounding yourself with? Because people want to be around people that are extraordinary, and people, and if you do that, you're going to do well. That's why people try to go to the best colleges. That's why people go to the best law schools. You learn the same thing everywhere, but you're surrounded by people with different types of goals. So, and even at the best law firms, you need to surround yourself, at the best law schools or whatever law school, you need to surround yourself with people that are doing the best. And, so if you're extraordinary, you might get a job at a large law firm, you might not, but once you're there, you need to continue being extraordinary to keep up. Getting into a good college, by the way, that's just like the first step. So if you went to a really good college, most people there are not going to go to top graduate schools. Most of those people there are not going to succeed. They get into a top college and they think they made it. Other people, once they get out of the top college, maybe they were doing really well there, and they go to a law school and they think because the law school gets all these people jobs at top law firms, they made it. And they stop trying to be extraordinary. And then people do the same thing when they get into top law firms. So there's always a race to do well. It never ends. Each time you get one advantage, like you get a job or you get something, that's just an invitation to do better and better and better. You have to. You're not going to ever amount to what you want to be unless you're extraordinary. So you need to be extraordinary wherever you are compared to those you're working with. And you want to work around people that are absolutely extraordinary as well. So if you're interested in a certain practice area, you want to work with the best people. If you're, whatever it is, you need to be extraordinary, because if you're not extraordinary, just average things are going to happen to you. So, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 5%, may get jobs of graduates, 3 to 5% of the large prestigious firms. But even, that 5%, probably 5% of the people that join the best law firms are never going to be partners in these law firms, because they're not extraordinary. They're average. They don't give it everything they got. They don't surround themselves with the best people. They don't try to get work from the best and most powerful partners. They're just sitting there pushing paper like it's a job and not like it's an opportunity to become a superstar in their life in the legal profession. So what do? You need to work hard and be smarter. You need to put yourself into competition with people that you're likely to do well with. So working in a giant commercial litigation law firm where it's very, very hard to get ahead and where it may not make use of your skills may not be a place where you can be extraordinary. It could be being and doing, I don't know, immigration law. I mean, it could be anything, but if you do immigration law, then you need to be extraordinary. You need to get the biggest clients. You need to give speeches. You need to write papers. You need to be seen as the best person in the market. Sometimes people will become immigration attorneys and they will have a very strong connection to a local ethnic group. I met one woman just this weekend that was Albanian, and she was an attorney and started a trust and estates practice out of law school, like after being at a big immigration firm for a few years, and then representing people in the Albanian community. And she does incredibly well. Like, I don't know if she makes $1 million a year, but her law firm certainly does over that. And because she was able to be extraordinary with that group of people. So, you need to be doing whatever you're doing if you don't feel like you can be extraordinary. And that may be not practicing law. That may be doing something else. You may be extraordinary running restaurants. You may be extraordinary at whatever, being a law professor. I mean, you need to be extraordinary and you need to do something where you can be extraordinary. So, I'll tell you a quick story that was kind of interesting. When I was in college, there was in my dorm, there were some of these math geniuses, and they finished calculus classes in their high school when they were like in eighth or ninth grade. And then they spent the next several years taking more advanced classes at local colleges before they finished high school and formally went to college. I'll tell you a quick aside that was very interesting. I was speaking to someone. I used to live in Pasadena, where MIT or Caltech is, and I was speaking to one of the admissions people there, and they said, well, this is how they evaluate applications. The first thing they do is they, basically get rid of all the people that don't have the highest test scores and the highest grades and so forth. And that's, a significant number of people, but then there's a lot of people left over. It's a small college. I think it has like 100 or under 200 people per class. And then they look at the applications and they say, okay, well, we're not just interested in people that have really good test scores and took all these classes. We're interested in people that are so smart, they're teaching their teachers and they're coming up with novel experiments and ideas in addition to just being good in school. So they're like looking for people that are just have incredible passion for math and sciences and are doing these things at such a high level that they're teaching their teachers and they're doing experiments on their own time that are just groundbreaking or very, very interesting and things that other people aren't doing. So they're absorbed in the subject matter. So those are the kind of people that get into Caltech. It's not just, you can't just get good grades. You have to be extraordinary. And that's important. So these kids in my college, they were very smart. I remembered a few of them. A lot of them have gone to the school called Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy, which is the school where people go. It's a boarding school, and if you're one of the top, you test really well in math and science, and you go there, and it's a boarding school, and you go there for free, and it's sponsored by the state. So a lot of these kids have gone there, and it was absolutely fascinating. Like they'd be taking like these high-level calculus classes, and they would have these textbooks that were not that big, and they would just, when they were studying or just doing homework, they would just look at a page for like 30 seconds and then they would go to the next page. If I was doing what they're doing, it would take me hours to figure out what was on one page. And so they were extraordinary. They were just people that had an incredible insight into mathematics that very few people in the world have. And they were there at the University of Chicago, having gone to this Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy or other types of schools around the country, and very, very good at it. I mean, just incredibly gifted. Like they had a natural skill. They probably weren't good writers. They didn't have the best social skills. A lot of times their hair was long and their hygiene was bad, but that's who they were. And so I was in the dorm room with these guys, and I remembered them. And years later, I looked a few of them up, and one is a math professor at like I don't know, University of Minnesota or something, like the sort of thing that you would expect someone with those skills. And then he probably could have done a lot of things, but he chose something that was right up his alley where he could use his skills and develop them more. And he got a PhD at University of Michigan or something after that, and was very good at that. But the other guy I remembered I found him, he was a journalist at a small town paper for several years. And I looked up some of his articles and they didn't appear to be, that good. I mean, they're okay, but they didn't go into a lot of detail. They didn't talk about things in a way that would get people interested in reading more. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that person being a journalist, but he decided he wanted to do something that didn't make the most of his skills. Like someone that's a very good writer and good at interviewing and so forth would probably be very, very good at that. But he took a job where he wasn't making the most of his skills. He wound up at a small newspaper, not working for the New York Times or anything, because he wasn't doing something that made the most of his skills. He could have been, a good math professor. He could have been worked at a company like Google. I mean, Google wasn't in existence back then, but, so anyone, the kind of articles he was writing could put together, even when they were in high school, an article about a gas station closing, which is one of the articles I read. And very few people like him have the ability to understand very, very complex math and have this natural affinity to it, where that insight and way of into numbers and things would be make them successful. So someone with those kind of skills should not be writing for a small town newspaper. So, what are your skills? Do you have skills practicing law that you feel are really extraordinary in some practice area or something where you'd be very good at it? It could be being a solo practitioner, telling people about different areas of law and doing everything. It could be all sorts of things, that you have to put yourself in a situation where you're going to be extraordinary, not something where you're going to be average, like this guy writing articles about gas stations closing. So, again, if you've been doing math problems like this guy was at a high level for since you've been a child and spent thousands of hours doing it, it's probably not a good idea to do something that's completely different altogether. It's not going to make the best use of your skills. And so, you need to be incredible at something. Like, what are you really good at? Like, or could you be really, really good at practicing law? Like, how could you do that? What practice area would make you happy? What types of clients would make you happy? Where would you be making the highest and best use of your skills? Because if you're not making the best use of your skills, what happens, and it happens to people that don't do this, if you're not making the best use of your skills, then you're going to be average. Or if you're not deciding you want to become extraordinary, you're not going to be average. I wasn't, when I came out of law school, I wasn't a good attorney. I didn't do well in my job as a summer associate. I wasn't completely committed. I mean, I learned how to do it and get an offer by the end of the summer, which is all about how many hours I built. It was very simple. No one understood that except me and one other person there. That was what was considered extraordinary. But when I got out of law school, I was working for a judge and I was making dumb typos and not making, all my decisions were not flowing the best they could or the best researched. And he was very, very hard on me. And I realized that if I wanted to continue being an attorney, I needed to, do very, very good work. So I learned how to do that. But then I didn't learn that I needed to be like his right-hand man and on his side and not disagree with him and get his policies and things that he wanted, which was, as a conservative Republican, are reflected in all the decisions. And so I ended up losing my job. And so I learned I had to do really good work. I had to be on the side of whoever I worked with in a major, major way. And that's what helped me in my next job. I also learned about interviewing. I learned about how you need to interview. You need to come across as someone that's going to work hard, that's going to be on the firm side. You need to look like you're hungry or want to do better than other people. I learned about that. I learned about resumes. Your resumes need to be focused and look like you want to work for other people and be focused on one problem. I mean, I learned all these things, but you can learn. You can start out average or even poor and you can learn like I did. But you need to do what's making the best use of your skills. So if this math genius hadn't become, writer for a small town newspaper, his life would probably have been much different. You imagine like having these skills and then competing with people that are gifted writers when you're not. I mean, that's insane. Like, I don't understand. Like, but think about that. Are you doing that with your natural gifts? Are you putting them towards something, where you can be better and better? Are you choosing something that makes you happy and that you can do well? And I want to bring up one thing as well. So in your first 5 years of practice as an attorney, like, you're learning, you're being basically paid to learn. So you're doing work that may be unpleasant, you're working hours that may be unpleasant, you're being exposed to work that may be unpleasant, but you need to be in a position. So learning the first 5 years is often not that fun, but you need to be the best learner and work the hardest to do well. But your goal is really to become an expert in something. And if you become an expert in something, I will submit to you that you need to enjoy it. So you need to go into work every day and you need to be looking forward to it and you need to be excited about it. And if you're not excited about it, then you're not going to put in your best effort. If you're not excited about it, you're not going to learn more and be more enthusiastic than other people if you're not excited about it. So if you're not excited about it, you're just going to be average. So you need to be doing the kind of work that gets you excited. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get all that type of work in your first 5 years, because for a lot of people, it's very unpleasant learning and so forth, but you need to look, is there a light at the end of the tunnel where I can be very good at this and will enjoy it? And if there's not, think about that. So, you need to do whatever makes the best use of your strengths. And, the rewards in life, don't go to the people who aren't good or aren't motivated or even excellent. They go to people that are extraordinary. And so what makes you extraordinary? Extraordinary means that if you put 100 people like you in a room, like, you're going to stand out as one of the best people. Like, you're You're just the natural choice because you're hungry, because you're learning, because your work's good, because you like what you're doing, because you make people around you rise to a higher level instead of dragging them down or being part of a group that's unenthusiastic. We need to be extraordinary. So I've spent decades as a legal recruiter, and my job is to recognize the extraordinary. Most people aren't extraordinary. The majority of people, the majority of people that I get jobs aren't extraordinary. There's very few people that are extraordinary, but it's very difficult to practice at a high level with the largest law firms and the most prestige in the long term, unless you're extraordinary. You can come out of law school and not get a great job. I've seen countless people do it, and because you're so extraordinary, you keep moving to better and better firms, and pretty soon, you're at one of the best law firms in the world, and then you're a partner, and you have a lot of business, and so the cream always rises to the top, and so even if you're not where you want to be right now, if you are excited about what you do and you do good work, then you're going to do well. Each day, I review at least 100 resumes of people that are applying to BCG. I've been doing that for 25 years. And I know that most attorneys are never going to get jobs in the best firms. I know that most of them are going to never make the money that they're capable of or have the satisfaction practicing law that, that you're, going to be extraordinary. And again, most of these students from the top 25 law schools are never going to make it. There's 250 law schools in the country over that. Those are just the accredited ones. Out of those, probably, 10% would be considered really very good. But even among those 25, people are more interested in the 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s. And if you didn't go to one of these schools, you're going to do very well there, or you're going to need to come out and do very well. But in those schools, you're going to need to do very well to get a top job. And if you didn't go to the best law school, you're probably going to need to be in the top 5 or 10 students in your class to get the best jobs in your city. And if you want to go to a major city and you're not from a major law school, you're probably going to need to be number 1 or number 2 in your law school. And people do this all the time. There are people that go to top 250 law schools and they're first in their class. That's respected because the person or second or third in their class, because the person showed that they were extraordinary in whatever law school and so forth they went to. And to get into, a top 25 law school, generally need to be pretty extraordinary just to get there. You need to have the best grades. I can't believe when I look at the test scores and so forth and the average grade points, even if you're looking like at a top 15 law school, I mean, the average LSATs are like 169, 171. I mean, that's amazing. And not only that, those people have, really good grades. And so just to get into these law schools, you have to be extraordinary. And then if you don't go to a law school that's not in the top 10 or 15, you're going to need to be, if you're not in the top 10, maybe it's the top 15, you're definitely going to need to be in the top 50% of your class, even at the best law schools. And there's exceptions, but this has kind of been the general rule for some time. So there's a very high bar to getting into the best law schools, and there's a very hard bar to do, to getting jobs out of that. And so, there's other people that are extraordinary to other things. I've met people that weren't the greatest students, but they were just exceptional in interviews. Maybe they had the ability to bond with people. They had incredible interpersonal skills. Maybe they were very good looking and they were able to use that. I mean, that has something to do with things sometimes. Maybe they have connections and, who knows, but they have something that sets them apart and makes them extraordinary. Sometimes people will, have impressed people in their local community prior to going to law school, and people know who they are because of that, and they're extraordinary. And if you're not coming from a top 10 law school, there's a whole pecking order of law firms as well. For example, even when you're talking about like Harvard and things like that, there's 5 firms that are considered like the most prestigious, like Wachtell and Sullivan and Cromwell. And even in the top law schools, very few attorneys will get jobs at those firms. Those are very, very hard, places to get jobs. And certain jobs will require students from these top law schools to be at the top of their class, and other jobs near the top of their class if you want to work at Skadden and so forth. And if you're from a top 10 law school and you're not at the bottom of your class, you're probably not going to get a job at the most prestigious law firms, and you may not even get a job at all. I mean, there's people that go to top 10 law schools, lots of them that don't get jobs in big firms. They just don't have it. And so you need to be extraordinary there. I had this woman I was working with not too long ago, and she was working at a law firm in Ohio because her husband was there, and she had some reason to be there. And it was a good firm. It wasn't one of the best. I don't know why she took that job there, but she had been in the Olympics and had been like a gold medal winner. She was on a crew team or something, and she wanted to move home to Seattle. And when I was working with her, I thought, well, the odds of her getting a job at one of these top law firms probably isn't that great. But all of a sudden, all these firms, like the majority of them that I marketed her to, interviewed her, and they were interviewing her because she'd been extraordinary and been this gold medalist. They thought, even though she might not have gotten the best grades, or she didn't go to a top 10 law school, they liked the fact that she was extraordinary. So I also want to talk a little bit about the rewards of being extraordinary, because the rewards of excellence are disproportionate to what you get when you're not at the very top. So in life, the largest rewards will always go to people who are extraordinary. You need to be extraordinary if you're going to get the rewards that you want out of life. You can't be average. In the Olympics, there's the gold, silver, and bronze. People don't care as much if you're a gold, silver winner as opposed to a bronze, even though that's very, very difficult to do. But everybody remembers the gold medal. And a lot of times it's just a small difference in performance. And very few people remember who got the silver or bronze medal. So, if you're in the top three, if you're not in the top three, you get nothing. You get no medal, even though you might be the best in the world at something. Even though, you tried hard, did your best, you're not going to get anything. So the rewards of excellence are completely disproportionate. And most people, aren't doing what they should be doing. They're doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing. Maybe you're putting yourself into competition with people that you're not going to succeed. So I've seen sometimes people get jobs with big firms, but they don't have the natural inclination and skills to practice law, and they're competing against all these people that are much better than them, that are smarter, maybe more motivated, that understand things better. And there's nothing wrong with not being able to compete in a large law firm. You can compete in other types of law firms, and you could start your own practice, but you have to be really good at what you do, and you have to put yourself in a position where you're able to be good. So, someone that's taught to practice law in a large law firm in New York is probably becomes a pretty exceptional attorney. If they take those skills and they move to Albany, New York, or Rochester with those types of skills and ways of seeing things, or they move to Cincinnati, Ohio, they're going to be extraordinary around the people that they're around. They're going to be the best. I always know people that go to like Yale Law School, very few of them become, go to Detroit. And people that go to Detroit, having gone to Yale Law School, like they're like considered gods there. They would, it's incredible. They become heads of, the biggest firms there because there's no one around them that was like that. And then they stay motivated and they do well. So, if you're putting yourself into competition with people where you're unlikely to succeed, that's going to hurt you. And you just need to do something where you have the chance to be extraordinary. And if you can't, you're wasting your time. Are you going to get ahead in the firm you're in? Do you have the skills to compete with those people and be the best? Are you going to get ahead in your practice area? Do you have the skills to do that and be your best? Not everybody has to be in a law firm. You can start your own practice and be extraordinary. You can work in different practice settings and be extraordinary. You don't have to work in a law firm. You could, like I said, you could be a law professor. You could be a prosecutor. All these things that make use of your passion. Maybe you hate criminals and you want to do trial work, and who knows? But if you can be extraordinary, you can do very well. And a lot of attorneys become politicians. Like you don't like someone like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. They got out of law school and decided they were going to work as in law schools and then become politicians. That's a way to be extraordinary. They didn't want to compete with other attorneys. They weren't passionate about working in law firms, and that's okay. And everybody has a skill, like I said. Like, what is your skill? Like, if you think about, like, where do you get the most positive feedback in your life? Like, what is it? Where do you get the most positive feedback, and what interests you the most? Like, are you interested in like policy and being a politician? Are you interested in working for the government? Are you interested in practicing law in a law firm? Like, what is it that really moves you, and what do you want to do? I see people all the time that they come out of law school and their dream, like, they might have gone to a top 5 law school. Their dream is to be in the U.S. Attorney's office, and then to to rise with that. And so they work really hard in the law firm for a few years, and they start trying to do that, and then they become well-known prosecutors. I was like watching the other day. When I started in my first firm, Quinn Emanuel, there was this woman whose goal was to work in the prosecutor's office. She was a graduate of Harvard Law School, and so she went to this law firm doing commercial litigation, and her dream was to work in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And then years later, I was watching like one of these shows about scammers or something, American Greed, and she was featured, like they were interviewing her the entire broadcast about prosecuting some criminal for making fake money. I thought that was very interesting. Like here she was, the focus of an entire television show, and she was extraordinary in what she did. So, life will ask, will pay you what you ask of it. So this is, how it works. There's a famous quote in Think and Grow Rich, and it says something like, "I bargained with life for a penny," or something like that, only to realize that at the end of my life, that life gives you what you ask of it, and I never ask for more or something. So you have to think big, and you have to think that you can achieve things, and you have to believe in yourself, and you have to figure out like, how can I get more and more and more? And if you ask life for that, you're going to succeed. You have to have big goals for yourself, and if you want to be a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and you're not a good writer, it's not a natural skill that you have. It's not going to happen. Like gifted mathematician, you have a better chance of being a Nobel Prize winner because you would be good at it. You would continually get better and better at it, and that's what would happen. And so you focus your efforts on things that you're likely to be good at. And it doesn't have to be practicing law, like I said. I mean, you can use your law degree to do all sorts of things. My family has a lot of people in it that were, a couple were like presidents and famous politicians and things. And I remember when I went to law school, my grandmother seemed to recognize I'd probably been practicing law for a long time. And she said, you don't have to be an attorney when you graduate from law school. My father was governor of Kansas, and his father was the head of the Senate, the pro tempore of the Senate. And you don't have to be, an attorney. You can do all these different things with your law degree, and that's something you need to think about. Like, those people obviously had passion for something else. They didn't have passion for practicing law. And if you do a poor job in your life and in your career, you're just gonna not feel good about yourself. You're gonna lose, and you need to do something where you're going to win. Why wouldn't you? Or choose to win where you're at, choose to be the best where you're at, instead of being average, which most associates are, most partners are. And it's sad when attorneys get more senior, when they have like more than 10 years of experience, if they're not extraordinary, meaning they haven't gotten business and they haven't done very well at their jobs and they've moved around too much, then employers look at them and think this person is not extraordinary, and so they don't get jobs. So you can spend the first 5 or 6 years of your job or your career, 10 years, being ordinary, but you're going to be in a situation when you're 10 years out where you're not going to be welcomed compared to someone that has a lot of business and is, and has moved to better and better firms and shows employment stability. Like, why would you want to be part of that group that's not extraordinary? And frankly, most attorneys are. And it's sad because you've gone into a profession and you've decided to work in a way that you're not going to be extraordinary, and you're not going to get the rewards. You're not going to have employment stability. You're going to have all these problems that you wouldn't have if you decided you wanted to be extraordinary. And, doing a good job gives you poor rewards, just like a bronze medal gives you as a reward. You might be competing with 100 people, but, it's not something that you're going to be as happy about. And, when you're really excellent, you'll get good results. You may get a silver medal, but you have to be the very best you possibly can. And you have to be outstanding. And it doesn't mean that you have to be outstanding, but you may not be outstanding in the market you're in. You may not be outstanding in your practice area. You may not be outstanding even in the firm you're in. Sometimes you'll join a firm and the culture will just be against you. The people will have a certain type of culture. They could all be Democrats and you could be a Republican, or they could have a certain, the law firm could have a certain atmosphere, like where everyone's closing their doors and people are unhappy, and it makes it hard to be extraordinary. There's a bad culture, it doesn't work for you, or maybe it's too social. Like, sometimes people go into firms and it's too social, and that is rewarded there. And so even if they do good work, they're the law firm's too social and that's not who they are. So they need to find an environment that allows them to be extraordinary. And I'll be very clear with you, like your success will depend on surrounding yourself with people that recognize your strengths and that they like you because of that. There's law firms all over the country where there might be like, four or five like, college football players and one like former NFL player, and that have like certain types of people there. There's law firms in different areas. Like I remember talking to one woman in South Carolina that got a job with a law firm in a, smaller size market in South Carolina. And she got there and all the people were married. They all went to the same high school. Their kids all knew each other. And she got there and felt like an outsider. And that's exactly what it was. She got there and she felt like she was surrounded by people that she could never fully connect with. And so, that the environment matters a lot. And then you can be outstanding in one environment and not in another. And different environments or law firms may be going downhill, and it doesn't matter how good you are. So, being excellent, outstanding, it's not that great, the difference. And and the best athletes practice harder. Like Michael Jordan famously didn't make his high school basketball team when he tried out. And so he decided he was going to be the best he possibly could. And he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, like more than anyone else did. And then he became a very good professional, one of the best that, that lifted the spirits of everyone in Chicago because he was so good. And then he did something really stupid. He decided, now I'm going to be a professional baseball player. Like, why would he do that? And so he didn't succeed at that. He was average. And why would he take something and try to compete at something that wasn't making the best use of his skills? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would he not continue to try to get better and better at basketball and try to be a baseball player? It's insane. So when you're outstanding, you're raising the standard for everyone around you. You're doing much better, you're giving more, your people are recognizing you more than being average. I look at the legal recruiting world and I think that everyone is either below average or just average. Why aren't they giving it all they got and trying to be the best in the world? Like they maybe they don't want to, or maybe they're afraid to, or maybe they're afraid of make them look, who knows? Thomas Edison, like he's someone that raised the standard for everyone. He kept pushing and pushing, and he kept testing things over and over and over again, and eventually made the light bulb, and now everyone has electric lights. He changed the world, but he did that because he pushed and pushed and pushed and wanted to be outstanding. So you need to do that too. And most people wouldn't have tried to 10,000 attempts to make a light bulb. They would have tried a few and then given up and moved on to something. And this is another thing too, that's kind of interesting. So most people are what are called dabblers, and so they just dabble in this and they dabble in that. They dabble in different law firms. They dabble in the work that they do. They dabble. They might start like running and they do it for 3 days and they decide, or 5 days, and they decide they're going to move on to something else. They just dabble. Sometimes they dabble in relationships. They move from one relationship to another, never fully committing or getting good at relationships, and exiting relationships the second they get difficult. They're dabbling. And so are you a dabbler, or are you someone that commits to things? Do you commit to people? Do you commit to causes? Do you commit to all these different things? You need to understand whether or not you're someone that's a dabbler or whether you're someone that takes things very seriously and does it. And Edison was quoted as saying, like, I never failed. All I did was find, 9,999 things that didn't work. And the other thing too is think about this. So when you're very good at something, you get better and better and better. And typically there's like a curve. So the curve is like you start something and you often will get very quick improvements. Like, so if you start playing tennis, like you'll have a hard time hitting the ball at first, but then you'll continually, get better. And so over a relatively short period of time, maybe 3 or 4 months, you can learn how to serve and volley and do all these things. But if you want to be really, really good, you'll go and you'll practice hours each day, like the best tennis players do, and you'll just throw yourself into it. But when you do that, you're only going to get small incremental improvements. Each improvement's going to be small, but they over time, all those little improvements are going to make you much, much better. And so you become a very good tennis player, and you keep throwing yourself into it. There are countless stories of people that were bad golfers or bad tennis players and things, and they decided they were going to focus, and they hit thousands of balls and played hours of golf each day, and it kept getting better and better. and just these small incremental improvements. And so to build your muscle, you need to continually be pushing yourself in a direction that you're good at and that you are improving. You can't dabble. You need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get better and better and better. And I'm amazed. Like there are attorneys. Like when I was practicing law, there was when I was at Quinn Emanuel, there was like one person like this, the guy that went to Yale Law School. And then when I was at my second firm, Dewey Ballantyne, there was another guy like this. And they were so smart. Like you would present them with a legal problem that other partners have been turning their mind, thinking about and not being able to get results. And you would present other associates were, and you would present these people with a legal issue, and they would all of a sudden like come up with a conclusion very quickly that enabled you to win a case and just scare the hell out of people. Like I saw one guy, there was a very smart partner from Gibson Dunn. He was actually not from Yale Law School. And there was an issue with some satellites that had been launched and had failed. And so this company was suing the company that had the failing satellites, and he was able to look at all this and some contractual language and everything and turn it around and make the person's fault had the where the satellites had failed instead of the opposite way, and then saved his client like a couple $100 million. I mean, it's incredible what people that spend a lot of time developing their legal muscles can do. Like just they become very, very good. They can figure things out that other people can. I remember when I was a summer associate, there was a guy like that, and there was this weird tax issue that was very, very difficult to understand. And I was working on it with a senior associate. He couldn't understand it. I'd spent like a week trying to understand it. And we went and we gave it to this very high up partner, and he took a look at it and he couldn't understand it when he saw it initially. But then he spent like a half hour, asked to close the door, and then he came up with a solution that we'd spent a couple of weeks trying to do. But he did that because he had this incredible muscle that he could work with. And so you need to try to be gifted like that. Not every attorney is going to be gifted where they're going to be able to see and poke into issues like that, but you need to figure out like what is it you're good at, and because you're going to competing with people that are very good, and you want to be the best you possibly can. You want to be gifted. In order to be gifted, you need to make those small incremental improvements and put yourself into something. Most attorneys, by the way, are journalists, so they would be very proud on their resume that they did trademark law and some corporate law and even got some exposure to litigation. They will think it's a really big deal to list that on their resume, that people are going to be very impressed that they could do multiple things. Well, the way the legal market works, I'm going to be very clear with you. I review, like I said, like 100 resumes at BCG every day. And out of those, 85 people show this just lack of commitment to anything. They've moved between practice areas. They haven't committed to law firms. Maybe they've moved in-house into a law firm and never have actually committed to one practice area where they would do it over and over and over again for years and get better and better and better. And that's what law firms want. Law firms do not advertise saying, hey, we'd like someone with some experience in corporate law, real estate, and IP. You don't see those ads. You see someone advertising, we need someone that's an expert in real estate finance, not all different types of real estate finance, or we need someone that's a leasing attorney, not just real estate buying and sells or real estate finance. Most firms want someone that's an expert in something. And so you're applying for one of those real estate finance jobs, the person that gets it is going to be the person that has that focus on doing that, because they've developed that muscle and they've been better and better. So think about your resume. When I do resume workshops, one of the things that I do is I just say, run your resume through ChatGPT and make it focused on one practice area. Because if you don't, then people aren't going to be impressed with you. People that are in-house all the time will always list all these different things that they did, and they'll have moved other in-house jobs, and they'll have all this different types of experience trying to get a job in a law firm, and a law firm only wants someone that's a subject matter expert. So I saw a 60 Minutes. Michael Phelps was a famous Olympic swimmer, and there was a segment about him, and it was interesting because it talked that he got up and did a 6:30 a.m. practice, and did it for several years, and he never missed a practice for years. And this is someone who's a gifted swimmer and could probably miss practices, but he went to those practices and just kept getting better and better and better. Does Could someone that's really good at ice hockey suddenly switch gears and compete with someone that's been practicing for a decade at 6:30 in the morning every morning and not missing a practice and getting maybe a little bit better each week and just continually refining their skills? Would be impossible. So whatever you do, you need to be excellent, and then you need to work the hardest you can to be extraordinary. And there's really no other way. Like you need to be extraordinary in a practice area. You need to be extraordinary compared to other people in your practice area. And what does that mean? So that means you're not just good at your practice area. You are better than the people around you. You rise to a higher level. You write papers. You give talks. You be part of networking groups. You be seen. You learn how to get business. You go out and meet with potential clients. You become someone that's so far above normal, no one can compete with you. And you rise above the people around you to a level that you're the natural choice for jobs, your natural choice to be a partner, the natural choice for all these things. And there's really no other way. I mean, if you decide you want to take a track of being average, then that's the results you're going to get from your life and from your career. If you're average, you're probably not going to enjoy the work that you do as much. You're not going to be as good at it. You're going to be around people that are going to be extraordinary, and they're going to be better than you, and you're going to get rewards that are average and not extraordinary. I don't understand, why you wouldn't want to be extraordinary. You may not, and if you don't want to, that's fine. But do you belong in the legal profession? And you can be average. And again, 85% to 90% of all attorneys are average, and that's fine. But what I'm talking about today is if you want to change the direction of your career and your life, being extraordinary is really the best choice for you. And I hope you to think about that. It doesn't matter, by the way, where you are today. Like, you could become extraordinary at the age of 50. You can become extraordinary, if you're in law school at the age of 24. You can always figure out what it takes to be extraordinary and do that. And you should try to do it in an atmosphere where you're around people where you can be extraordinary. You should try to do it in an atmosphere where you're making the best use of your skills. So the environment you're in makes a big difference. You maybe want to go and be a big fish in a small pond. That's a way to be extraordinary. It doesn't have to be in the biggest cities where you might not be able to be extraordinary, but you need to do something. You need to do a practice area you can be extraordinary. I've seen people, lots of people that were at like major US law firms, and they'd gone to good law schools and stuff. And then they realized that if they wanted to become a partner there and be extraordinary, they were going to have to bring in large public companies as clients. And that was really the only way to do it. And they look at this and they're like, this is not something that is going to enable me extraordinary. So they do things like they start a personal injury law firm, and then, within a few years, they're making millions of dollars a year. I mean, they take their skills that may not have allowed them to be extraordinary in one environment, and they put them into something where they're suddenly competing with people that aren't as motivated, as it may not be as smart, that may not have all these skills. And so the rewards go to the people who are extraordinary. It doesn't have to be in a large law firm. It doesn't have to be in a large city. It doesn't have to be in one practice area or another. It doesn't matter what practice area you do. I mean, you could be whatever. I mean, you could be doing real estate foreclosures or something, but that, if you're very good at that, it's going to make you extraordinary. So again, the legal profession isn't going to just reward effort. It's going to reward excellence. It's going to reward people that are focused. It rewards people in the right environment. It rewards people that are getting better and better, that are focused on one practice area. And so, regardless of, what you do, you're a law student or whatever, the long-term success is going to be, when you push yourself beyond what you're, really good at. I see people all the time that it's very interesting. They might have been like a nurse, and then they went to law school, and then during law school they worked in the health law clinic or something at their school, and they have the entire career focused on health, and then they become a health law attorney, and they obviously their passion for health law or health, it makes them stand out. And so they may be competing with 50 other applicants for a health law job, but the law firms hire the person that has that long-term focus, and they like that, as opposed to moving around. I mean, people think about your resume. Like, does your resume say in the summer you did litigation, then you did some corporate, then you did public interest, and you were part of the real estate law society? I mean, you're just all over the place, and you're not focused. And so even, resumes, by the way, should take off anything that's not focused on one thing and doesn't make it look like you're pushing to do one thing. Everything needs to be about focus and looking like you're different than other people. because you have that and you have a passion for something. Like the resume that's all about health law shows a passion. If you have a passion for something, that means you're committed to that, and it means you're probably going to do better and better than compared to other people. And you need to align whatever your strengths are with discipline and an unshaking commitment to growth. Like when I got into what I'm doing right now, like I realized instinctively that it would make me happy, that I was excited about it, and that I was much more excited about it than practicing law, that it was something that I really liked. And so, and I knew that I could push myself into it and I could continue learning and I would continue getting better and better. And so, if you're not striving to the best of what you do, the odds are, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. If you're not able to be enthusiastic and you don't think you can be the best in the world in your practice area or in your location or in the type of firm you're in or in your practice setting. You may not belong in a law firm. You may belong in the government. You may belong. I mean, obviously, Barack Obama and Clinton that didn't go in law firms chose to be law professors and then do other things. I mean, it doesn't, and they became the president of the United States. I mean, my God. So you don't have to be in a law firm. You don't have to, you could be like a really good legal journalist. I've seen people do that. I mean, you can do all these different things, but you need to go someplace where you're passionate and where you're going to do well, because the legal world only recognizes, top performers. And there's a, there's a very fine margin between success and not being successful. So I want you to be successful. I want you to understand that you're only going to be successful to the extent you can focus on something to put your effort. You're only going to be successful to the extent that you enjoy what you're doing. You're only going to be successful to the extent that you're getting better and better. You're only going to be successful to the extent that you rise above the people around you. You're only going to be successful to the extent you're in the right environment for yourself. And sometimes people are not. The right environment's not working for others in a law firm. The right environment may be having your own practice. I mean, you have to do whatever makes you extraordinary. Now, so many people, by the way, will do what everyone else is doing. They'll be like they'll follow the herd, and they'll want to be like everybody else, and they'll think that if they do something more than others, that's not good, and so forth, and that they care about what other people think about them. So they're not gonna try their hardest and be the best. They're gonna do what everyone else is doing, and they're not gonna learn like the difference between average and extraordinary. And so that's what I want for you. I want you to learn how to be really, really good at whatever you're doing, and I want you to succeed. And if you follow this advice that I'm talking to you about today and you understand it, just realize that if you aren't extraordinary, you're going to get moderate rewards. And it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter what law school you went to. It doesn't matter where you are now. You have an opportunity to be extraordinary. Just think about it. Like, what can I do to be better than everyone else? And if you do that, you're going to get major rewards. So attorney that's average and not extraordinary may be able to make $200,000 a year as a 15th year attorney, when other attorneys that are extraordinary may make $7 or $10 million a year. And those people that are extraordinary are doing something different. So being an attorney, you can make millions of dollars a year. It's not that hard, but you have to be focused on something and extraordinary. All right, so we'll take a quick break. The break will just be for like 1 or 2 minutes. And then when I come back, I will answer questions. You can ask questions about any questions you have about your career. You can ask questions about this presentation, but I think when you ask questions about things that are, maybe not about this or about anything else, like your questions you're having, those are very helpful for everyone on the call. And I will take questions as long as people have them. So, you can ask anything that you want about today's presentation or anything else. So I'll be back in just like 1 or 2 minutes. And when I come back, I'll do questions. Thanks. All right, let's get started. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I'll kind of go through these questions. I won't necessarily go through them in the order they were received, but I'll go through all of them. I'll try to choose some of the most interesting first. And I would say that the questions and answers are probably probably the most important part of the webinar, because it enables it enables me to give answers to things that may flesh out things that other people may have gotten from this, and that the questions they have. So I always say that, like, it's kind of a crude analogy, but not watching the questions and answers till the end is kind of like going to the bathroom without wiping yourself or something. It's kind of a crazy analogy, but I heard that once about a yoga class where you're supposed to, relax for 5 minutes in the yoga class before hot yoga before after, because the whole purpose of yoga is to get you into a meditative state. And then once you're in that state, to relax for a little bit. So that's kind of some of the questions and answers. Let's go to those right now. And again, you should ask questions about anything, that you have related to this, and we'll answer as many questions as you have. And again, if there's anything that you think questions that you think about, I will answer them. Pretty much any question. Oops. This little OCD about how I do these. Okay, as a 3L who's about to join a big firm, how do I avoid falling in the trap? Everyone around me seems focused on prestige and compensation, but I'm already worried those things won't bring long-term satisfaction. Are there questions I should be asking myself or the firm before I start full-time? Make sure I'm not following the herd. No, so you cannot ask those questions. Your goal going into an interview is to get the job. So you don't ask any questions that are going to make it look like you may not fit in or the law firm may not be good for you, because the law firm is going to get lots and lots of questions, that lots of people that aren't asking questions. Anytime you introduce any type of friction to the hiring process, you ask about working remotely, you ask about bonuses, you ask about all those things, then that's going to get you disqualified. When you go into a large law firm, being focused on compensation your first 5 years is something that a lot of people do. And prestige is important, because if you work at the best law firm you can, that's something that you have on your resume that's unique. And if you stay there very long, I always tell people, I have a relative that went to NYU and he got a job at SCAD, and he was there for a year and was talking to me about, I might start looking for other things. And I was like, that's the last thing in the world you want to do. You want to stay there as long as you possibly can. You want to do the best you possibly can there. If you can, you want to try to make counsel or partner there. You want to just keep, sticking around doing the best work. But compensation is not important your first 5 years of practice. The most important thing is to get training and experience. And that's really what your first 5 years is about. You don't learn how to become a lawyer in a law firm in law school, not even close. You don't become a good lawyer in your practice area after 1 or 2 years. It takes about 5 years, because it's a muscle. And, there's kind of this rule that Malcolm Gladwell came up where it takes about 10,000 hours to learn anything. Any great performer like the Beatles, practice for 10,000 hours, playing in small clubs and things before they became good. And so you need to, you need to get that experience. And so you get into the best firm you can, and then you do the best you can. You become an expert in your practice area. That would be my advice. And you may not get long-term satisfaction in your first 5 years, but you're going to get trained in your practice area. And then you can go into other environments, other practice settings, maybe that make you happier. But you shouldn't worry too much about long-term satisfaction. You should try to become the best attorney you can be. And then once you get that training, then you can take that into other things. But I recommend that everybody, if you get into a large law firm or whatever size law firm, if you can do a large law firm, maybe you can move to a better one after a couple of years, but you generally want to stay there, if you can, about 5 years to get that training. And then you figure out, what makes you satisfied. But you might get into a large law firm and after 6 months decide that you're never going to be happy, and then you do something else. But, you want to do the best you can. Next question. I'd like to make a lateral move to a larger firm, but I worry that my experience in a niche practice area may not translate well. How do I frame that my narrative during interviews to show that I have the potential to work at the highest level, even if my current background doesn't immediately align with big law expectations? Okay, so you move to a larger law firm typically by looking like you do have that focus in a niche practice area. So large law firms that have openings are going to hire people that have experience and that are focused on one practice area. That's how they work. They don't have openings for generalists. So, if you think that your niche practice area isn't something that's going to translate well into a large law firm, maybe it's not the right practice area, then you can always become kind of a generalist in your practice area and then try to do that later. But most openings in law firms are going to be for specialists. There's kind of a rule too that's important to understand. So in the largest markets like New York City, they want people that are specialists, that are very focused on a practice area. But if you're moving to Missouri or Minnesota or something, the law firms in those cities don't have the largest clients, so they tend to do more generalist work. So it just depends on kind of, what market you're in. But you also have to ask yourself why you want to go to big law. Do you want to go to big law because you're going to make more money, or do you want to go to big law because it's going to make you a better attorney and you're going to be more focused on what practice area? Because, if you're a client, by the way, just think about this. So if you're a client and you need an attorney, like, are you going to hire someone like if you have like the example I gave earlier, if you have like a real estate finance issue and you need someone to help you with real estate finance, are you going to give your work to someone that's a real estate generalist and does leasing and buys and sells buildings and things, or are you going to want to focus on someone that has that niche experience? And a client is going to want someone with a niche experience. So why wouldn't you become an attorney that has niche experience? I mean, it's good that you have a niche practice area. You don't need to be in a major law firm. People that are in mid-sized and smaller law firms that are in niche practice areas can make incredible amounts of money. They don't need to be at a major law firm to do it. So, what are your reasons to go to a major law firm? The only reasons I can think of to go to a major law firm is, it's good to get them on your resume. It's good to show a pattern of upward mobility. So that's good. But, you have to understand, is that going to really take me to the finish line in terms of who I want to be in my career? And that's how I would think about it, because you don't necessarily need to do that in a major law firm. Law schools, the big law schools, everybody wants to go to big law firms, and it's kind of what the herd is telling them to do. And that can work out, but many times it doesn't. I remember seeing when I was going to law school, University of Virginia, it was kind of the same thing. Everyone was trying to go to these big law firms. There was a guy that was a class year ahead of me, and he was going to work for like an attorney that did railroad law in Richmond, Virginia, or something like that. And the attorney doing railroad law was like very well regarded. Back then, you couldn't look people up on the computer. You had to like look at their online, other written profiles in Martindale Hubble and stuff. So people used to look up other attorneys before the internet, and Martindale Hubble, these big printed things. And so I looked this guy up, and then he was another guy that I looked at like 10 years later, and he'd become this guy. He'd taken over his practice and become a well-regarded railroad law attorney with a big practice, and very, written all these papers, and was the head of, the different things to do railroad law. And he made a decision to do railroad law when everybody else like him would go to Washington, D.C. or whatever big cities to practice law. So, what are you doing something that's going to give you long-term success or not? Okay, let's see here. Okay, I don't attend social events and lunches regularly because of family obligations. There's a way to offset this. This will be viewed as someone who's going above and beyond. What signals can I show that I'm invested without sacrificing my personal commitments? Okay, so yeah, you don't have to go to social events and lunches regularly because of family obligations, but you still have to do like the best work. So attorneys inside of law firms that are partners will always give work to people that they think are going to do the best job, the way they want it, the speed they want it, and give them the absolute best work product. So going to social events is important to the extent that it enables you to get to know other attorneys. But if you're doing the best work in your firm, then partners are going to give you the work because they're not stupid. I mean, they want to have work done for their clients that's going to be of the highest quality and done the way they want it to do, and give the best results to their clients. So that's the most important thing. The only thing that really matters the most is to do the best possible work you can. Now you're talking about family obligations. So it's okay to have family obligations depending on the firm that you're with. There may be so much work that you need to do to succeed that it may make it that firm is not a good fit for you, that you need to go to a place where you can do well because of that. I remember the first firm I was in, Quinn Emanuel, almost every single partner in that firm was divorced, and they were divorced because they didn't have the time to give to their spouses and their family. I remember when I was growing up, there was a kid that I worked with whose dad was head of this law firm, Quinn Emanuel, or not Quinn Emanuel, Miller Canfield, which is like one of the biggest and oldest law firms in Detroit. And he was a mess. I mean, he had drug problems, he had kicked out of schools and things, and that all happened to him because he didn't have a father that was around, and so that causes problems. So sometimes a different type of law, you might want to be in a different type of law firm, but the best thing you can do in any law firm, only thing that the law firms really care about, it doesn't matter really how social you are. I mean, different people have different types of things, but what matters is the quality of your work. And if you do the best work, then, partners are going to give you work because that's what they need and that's what their clients need. So you just focus on the quality of work. So if you have to take care of your family and be home from 6 to 8 or 9 to do it, then maybe you work extra hours after that or whatever, and you still can succeed, but maybe not at the level, that you want, that type of atmosphere. These are great questions. Thank you everyone for asking them. Very good questions. Okay, I'm currently a 2L at a top 20 law school, and this webinar made me realize how many of us assume that good grades in the summer associate position will guarantee long-term success. But you mentioned only a fraction of attorneys thrive in the profession. How can I begin cultivating the habits and the mindset of an extraordinary attorney now, even before I graduate? Are the things that I should be doing outside of classes and OCI that will set me apart over the next 5 to 10 years? Okay, so one of the things I would say is listening to this kind of webinar probably could change that. Most law students won't listen to this kind of webinar because you're listening to it. It's going to help you. You're going to already realize what you need. This is not the type of stuff they teach in law school. They don't teach for whatever reason. But how can you begin cultivating the habits and mindset of an extraordinary attorney now? You have to get involved in self-improvement. So you should be listening to, things like Tony Robbins and reading self-improvement books and realizing that, what you need to do that. Think and Grow Rich is a great book. I know lots of attorneys that have studied that book and become successful. One of my personal mentors, Tony Robbins, used to say that he knows people that read that book once a year and they're successful. He knows people that have read it twice a year and they're even more successful. He knows people that read it 3 times a year and they're even more successful. So reading about self-improvement and ways to develop a mindset that's going to make you successful is important. That's what helped me change, and anybody can do that. Most attorneys are not interested in self-improvement. They think they know everything, but there are certain ways of thinking and things that the most successful people have. And so you should do those, and then you should learn about the power of focus and all the sorts of stuff that I've been talking about today that can help you quite a bit. I've recently been let go due to a downsizing, and while I know I perform well, I'm worried about how to explain this in interviews without sound like I'm making excuses. What's the best way to convey a career disruption so it doesn't disqualify me by seeing extraordinary future employer? It's interesting and kind of sad, when you're in a really competitive market like New York City and you're at a big firm and you're let go in a downsizing, it can be next to impossible to get a job in another big firm because those other big firms can choose from people that are currently employed. So, why would they take someone that's not employed? The reason being that anytime law firms are laying people off or letting them go, they're always going to not let go of the people that are providing the most value. And so, if you're let go, then it signals that, you weren't part of that elite group of the best people. So you have to learn from that lesson and realize that, in order to have job security, a lot of times you're going to have to be the best of the people you're around. So even if you're at, a big firm and there's 10 people in your class and they let 8 of you go, well, that's signaling to other firms that you weren't those 2 people that were the best. So that's the problem. I saw one guy, he'd been unemployed for like 6 months. And it was interesting, like his firm, he'd have to be there Monday morning at 8 a.m. And a partner that was in his practice group, I think investment manager, was in Boston. And she would send out assignments for people to grab every morning at 8 during the week. Some weeks she would, some weeks she wouldn't. And he never got any work. And I was like, well, why didn't you do that? And he's like, I'm not gonna, I don't need to, I went to Columbia Law School. I don't need to beg for work and things. And so he was let go. And then he got an interview. I worked with him and got him an interview at a big firm. And then he went in, he had like a 1 day of interviews, and he went in, and the first partner he interviewed with said, wow, I didn't realize you're unemployed. And so, we're not going to hire you. And so he had a whole schedule of going to lunch and doing all these interviews and everything, and they just sent him home. So, there's nothing wrong with losing your job in a downsizing. I mean, that happens to people. You need to learn to, do the best job you can at your next job. The best way to describe that, especially if you're not at one of the largest firms, is basically like the firm didn't have enough work in my practice area. Like, maybe a partner left or something, or they just didn't have enough work. And so they couldn't keep myself and the other associates busy. So they let us go. And so that's a good excuse and it works. But, you need to, recover from that and just learn that, in the future, you want to be at the top. And that's one of the things that people don't realize. go to a firm, like big firms and things like corporate and things work will slow down. Sometimes a big law firm is doing like a huge case that a lot of attorneys are on, and the case settles, and then they let a bunch of people go. Remember one firm where all these litigators came over from Jones Day because they had this huge like patent litigation case. And so all these litigators were working like, you know, 2,500 hours a year for like 3 years. And then all of a sudden the case settled and they let them all go, but they probably didn't let all of them go. So, the cases settle, corporate like work slows down. You could be in capital markets doing IPOs and all of a sudden the market freezes up and there's no IPOs anymore. And so they let most of those people go. So those are good excuses, but for the most part, yeah, you don't, you explain it away that way, but you just try to be careful that you're not in that position in the future. Yeah. Okay. I've worked hard to get into a top 10% lower ranked law school, but I still worry about being taken seriously in the job market. What can I do right now to stand out to firms that might overlook my application based on the school I attended? Okay, so just so everyone understands, the school you went to has nothing to do with your long-term success practicing law. It's absolutely got zero to do with it. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's kind of interesting when you go into, middle America and other places, like people didn't go to the best law schools. They might join a law firm in Bismarck, North Dakota, like out of law school or whatever. But then they stay there their entire careers and probably end up making more money and having better careers than people that didn't go to top ranked law schools or did go to top ranked law schools and started their careers in big legal markets and then just kind of moved around or went in house and stuff. The people that, commit often do the best. So it doesn't matter where you went to law school. You can go into all sorts of practice areas. You can go into personal injury, you can go into immigration, you can go into trust in the states, you can go into insurance defense, you can go to whatever if you can't get a job in a big law firm. And all that means is that, you have you can compete, you can compete in a practice area where you can do the best. With the top 10% of the lower ranked law school, you can be the top 10% personal injury attorney, or the top 10% trust in estates, or the top 10% immigration, or the top 10% family law. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do. And I will submit to you a couple of different things that are important to understand. So what does it take to get into a good law school? It takes, having really good grades, and it takes doing well in the LSATs. And, I don't want to kind of be too rude here, but it's very interesting. Like before the year 1999, the SAT was actually designed, it wasn't designed to test people and to go to school. It was designed as sort of something that people realized what it was. It was an intelligence test. So the SAT, for the most part, has always been, to some extent, not as much anymore because you had all this stuff happen with DEI and all this stuff. But for the most part, it was always an intelligence test. So your score would directly correlate to your intelligence. They could literally measure your IQ based on the score you got. So your score would literally measure your IQ. So colleges could know your IQ based on that test, even though ostensibly it was just this test that everyone took that wasn't an intelligent test, when in reality it was. So obviously the smarter people they brought to the school, the smartest people got into the best schools. Intelligence test, literally the SAT was intelligence test, and it had not much to do with anything else in your intelligence. And certain people can take the SAT and get very high scores. Other people could study for years and get the same score because they're intelligent. And in some respects, the LSAT is sort of the same thing. It's a intelligence test, but it has to do with legal reasoning and conclusions you reach and how your mind works and things. And so your LSAT scores will basically have something to do with how well you can compete, analyzing problems and stuff at the highest levels. But you don't need to have that skill. So if you scored in like the 30th percentile in the LSAT, so you think you can go to work in a major law firm with a bunch of smart people, you're probably not competing in the best practice area. You can go into family law, which is mainly about emotions. It's not about, it is about your ability to write papers and things, but it makes use of other skills. You may have incredible social skills and the ability to see into people and empathize and things, and that might be best for you. You might be a really good prosecutor. You don't have to have the highest level SAT scores and the highest levels of natural intelligence, because the people that succeed don't always have that. They take what they do and they apply themselves to the best possible thing. So law schools, the best law schools may not like the school you went to. And the school you went to will often tell them how well you did in the LSATs and what your motivation was getting grades and things when you were in college. Like, were you super motivated to get the best grades, or were you not? And did you have the natural skills of the LSATs? So I would just say that, if you're not getting into it, that if you don't have a top law school and you are there because you didn't do well in the LSATs and you weren't motivated enough in college, then go into something else. I mean, one of the most famous personal injury attorneys in Chicago history was this guy named Richard Corboy. And I went and interviewed him when I was in the law school. I wrote a book about personal injury attorneys. And he was like literally the bottom of his class in the law school and became the most successful personal injury attorney. Joe Biden. So Joe Biden went to Syracuse. I happened to be friends with a guy that was a tenured professor there. And Joe Biden was last person, like the low, not even like the lowest ranked, the number 0 ranked person in his law school. So, the very last person, but yet he became one of the most, influential politicians, in history. So, he was a little old at the end, but he was a very good politician. So, it doesn't matter where you went to law school or how well you did. You don't need to be the smartest, as obviously Joe Biden wasn't, or have the natural skill. You just need to put yourself in an environment where people are going to do well. I was, struck by your comment that many firms unintentionally build environments that drive out their most extraordinary people. How can I assess whether our current culture may be doing this? Are there diagnostic tools, red flags, or patterns or attrition that suggest we're losing talent we should be retaining? Okay, this is good. This is my hiring partner. Okay, so people will feel comfortable in different atmospheres. So, if I meet somebody, like I'm single right now, so I've been going out on these dates. And so I will meet some people, and after the date, I just won't feel good, or I'll just feel kind of average. And I'll meet other people, and after the date, I will feel very, very good about them. Like, I will just be excited. I'll listen to music on the way home and feel good about myself. And so, are you surrounding yourself with people that are making you feel good about yourself, or are you surrounding yourself with, are the associates in your firm, did they feel good about the culture and the people there, or did they feel pushed out by it? So different law firms have different cultures. So you need to hire people that fit in with your culture, and there's just different cultures. And so you're not going to hold on to people if they're not comfortable in your culture, because they won't feel good there. So you need to hire people like that. And so if you hire people for other reasons, then they may not do well. I know law firms in Los Angeles that there's this very good like middle market firm that, that when they get applications, they always like try to hire people from the biggest firms, like the best law schools. And those people come there and they tend not to do well, because that law firm has a certain culture. And if they were to hire people that they weren't only looking at those things, they were looking at people that fit in with their culture, they would do, much better. So, how do you know you're losing talent you should be retaining? Like, you try to have the people work with people that they're comfortable with. You mentor them. So, if somebody needs, help with writing or something, you have partners that are there for them as their friends that are helping them. You be very careful about criticizing people too much. So, when you do reviews, the reviews need to be encouraging and make people feel like they have a future, as opposed to the opposite. You overlook mistakes sometimes and don't make people feel really badly about that. You create a culture where you have partners that are encouraging to people. A lot of law firms will partners will be siloed. So there'll just be these different groups of partners that are competitive with each other, and it won't be like an overall, environment where everyone works together. So one of the things that's very common is, like, if you take firms like Sullivan and Cromwell, Wachtell, and a few others, like they only hire, or Cravath, they only hire people. They don't hire laterals. They only hire people out of law school. They don't really hire lateral partners very often. Gibson Dunn hires lateral partners, but they make them interview with almost every partner in the law firm. So you create a culture where that works. And so why doesn't Cravath or Wachtell or these other firms, why don't they hire laterals? They don't hire laterals because they don't want that culture to come in and affect them from other firms. They have a culture that's worked for, not Wachtell, but hundreds of years, or 100+ years. And so they maintain their culture, realizing that they need to have certain types of people there that have risen through the ranks and understand it. And it's very interesting, and they become very good firms that way. So a law firm culture can be formed by, if you bring in different groups of partners that don't share just for money and not for cultural fit, like Gibson Dunn does. They make sure it's a cultural fit. And then they try to, create a certain type of culture where people feel good working there and they're not driven out. And most of the time people will leave when they feel like they're unappreciated, or they feel like, the people don't like them, or they feel like they're never going to succeed there. And so, that's the mistake that a lot of firms make. And then also when, the culture is, something that doesn't work for them. Some people go to cultures where all the partners and associates keep their doors closed, and they like that because they think, oh, lets me, it allows me to, do good work. Other people like the doors open. One of the things that's, most important about culture is making sure that people that are against the firm, that have, are out for themselves, that, associates that are kind of negative and stuff, that those people are pushed out, and the people that are, not doing those things are allowed to stay there. So you keep people around that are that are for the firm and the culture, and then you don't hire people that are. I mean, that's a lot of information, but those are the things that I've recognized. Okay, what kind of mentorship or career structure is most ambitious for career associates who could be future rainmakers or leaders? Well, like the thing about being an associate and being a good associate and becoming a future rainmaker and stuff. One of the things that an example is like if you want to meet a significant other, and have kids and everything, it's not something that anybody's going to teach you how to do. It's just something you're going to figure out. So you need to figure out how to do all these things. You need to figure them out on your own. Like you listen to webinars like this and you can figure it out. You can read books and figure it out. You can watch what other people are doing that are successful and figure it out. But most of the time, there's not a lot of training for this. So, what in terms of career development, my only suggestion would be to focus on one practice area, do the best work you can, work for people where people experience success working for them and not the opposite. In some firms, there are people partners where if associates work for them, like just bad things happen, like the person's not nice, they undermine them, that so you avoid negative partners, you avoid, you try to surround yourself with people that are successful, and then you surround yourself with other ambitious associates, because what they're doing will, rub off, and then you'll try to be even better than them. All right, what is the best way for a senior attorney to start building that without appearing opportunistic or disrupting current team type dynamics? Can late stage business development still be effective? Yeah, so clients are not dumb. They will hire the person that seems most focused. So John Quinn, who built Quinn Emanuel from a small employment law firm to the largest litigation firm in the world, what he used to say to clients is, he said, like, if you give me this case, I will eat, breathe, and sleep it. Like I would, no one is going to work harder or take this more seriously. So that's what clients want. So, disrupting current team dynamics, meaning you're getting work from people and that sort of thing. I mean, late stage business development, of course, it can be effective. I mean, but it's something you have to want. So if you want it, like you start looking like an expert in your practice area, you write papers, you join associations, you give talks, you build up your resume, you talk about what you've done well on your firm bio page, and you have that going for you. You look focused on a practice area. You try to find people that would be clients. You put yourself in a situation where you're likely to get clients, which means, you could be on the board of, I know a guy that was on the board of a hospital, and he wasn't really expecting anything in return, but he ended up, the hospital had this huge legal problem. And because he was there and seeing, he got the case, and it was a huge case, and billed millions of dollars a year. So, putting yourself in a situation where you can get business, and trying to do that and just figuring it out. I mean, there's lots of ways to get business, but it's like, again, like meeting a spouse or something, you figure it out. So that's kind of how I would recommend going about it. Okay. How do I pivot or rebrand myself mid-career without starting from scratch or losing credibility with my current firm or network? So how do you rebrand yourself? Why would you lose credibility with your current firm? So you rebrand yourself by looking like you're focused on one practice area, by making sure that you look like you're a very, very good choice for clients. And by, working harder than other people in your firm. One of the things that people don't realize is, when you're in a law firm and you're representing clients, like you're getting work from other people, your job is always to create work. So what does that mean? So you have a client and you do one thing for them, but you say, I have these other things I can do for you as well that will help you. It's going to be valuable. It's going to help you. So you always want to create work. You want to find partners that have work and then give them suggestions for extra work you could do. And so creating work is like the most important thing. So you create work from your existing clients, you create work in the market from your expertise, you just create work. And in a lot of law firms, for litigators, like people that want to be successful litigators, they will get a list of all the people that were sued each day. And then they will take a look at those lists and they'll call the CEOs and general counsels and things, telling them they want to do the work, and they'll create work. And so you always figure out ways to create work. That's the most important thing for anybody, is to create work. Like, you create work or you find work. So, having work is the most important thing. So how do you create work or find work? So the whole job of an attorney, whether you're a partner or an associate, is to find work or create work. And so, you want to get as much work as possible. That's the whole clue. I mean, the attorneys that have the most work have the most business, or are billing the most hours, and you just learn how to create work, and you get clients. Okay, how do I realistically evaluate whether to keep pushing forward in big law, or whether the same extraordinary potential might be better recognized in the smaller firm setting? Yeah, so you may be surrounded by people that are smarter than you, that are more motivated than you want to be, that are better at interpersonal relationships or whatever, and it may not make sense for you to stay in a large law firm. Most people don't, but you can be often much more successful and have a longer career than you can in another practice, a smaller market, or a smaller firm where you're like the big fish in a small pond, or even in a different practice area. What I would say, if your question is how to keep pushing forward in big law, again, this is a very strong recommendation and something that I want to make sure everybody understands. You need 5 years. So 5 years in big law, 5 years, it's the smartest thing you can do, because that will make you a very good attorney. And why does it make you a good attorney? Why does big law make you a good attorney? The reason big law makes you a good attorney, and a better attorney than you can be in other practice settings, is because big law has big clients, and big clients will pay for you to look at issues in depth. And big clients have general counsels, and they require the best quality work. And so if you're working for large clients that have very high expectations, and partners that became partners by doing very, very good work, then you're going to become a better attorney. If you are doing litigation, commercial litigation in a major law firm representing the largest companies in the country, you're going to have very good legal arguments. You're going to have to do very polished work. Your briefs and things are going to need to be better than exactly what the general counsels want. And very good. You're going to need to get the best results possible. You're going to need all these things that wouldn't be required in other practices. If you're doing insurance defense, representing people or insurance companies defending auto accidents, it's going to require a lot less detail than you would get in other practices. I'll tell you a very funny story that shows you like the power of being a good attorney versus an average attorney. So there was a guy, he's no longer alive. His name is John Vandekamp, and he used to be the Attorney General of California. And he was working at this firm, Dewey Valentine, where I was at, and he had this client that was an insurance company in Massachusetts. And if people came to California and got in accidents, then his job was, then he would get these cases, and they would just give them to younger associates like myself. And so I was in this auto accident. There were like, I don't know, three attorneys on the other side that were, I don't know, there were other attorneys involved, and I was defending my client. Other people were, I don't know exactly what was going on, but just think there's 3 other attorneys on their side, and then there was me defending the woman that was in an auto accident. So when I got this case, I figured, okay, well, I'm going to countersue them, under something that's believable. So I countersued them for like $500,000. And then, I proceeded to, bog them down with discovery and doing all these things. But then there was this thing called mandatory arbitration, where you had to go and you had to, everyone had to go to arbitration, these auto accidents. So I went to this arbitration, and prior to the arbitration, you had to submit your exhibits and your arguments, and they had to be verified or something by the client. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I went to this arbitration, and none of the attorneys on the other side had done that because they weren't experienced, they weren't doing very detail oriented. And so I was awarded by the arbitrator, I don't know, $500,000 in the arbitration. And all they needed to do was file what's called a motion to vacate the arbitration. And if they filed this motion to vacate the arbitration, then everything would go to trial. So at the end of the 14 days, they hadn't filed this. So I filed a motion for a judgment of $500,000. And it went to so all these attorneys on the other side were like, what the hell did this guy just do? And so then eventually they filed a motion asking for the court to step in and not give me that award. And it was very funny. The attorneys on the other side were so bad that one of the attorneys said, or the attorneys came back and said that I was responsible for doing this. I'd asked my secretary to prepare this motion to vacate the arbitration, to sign it on my behalf, and to file it, and she didn't do it. And then the secretary provided a declaration saying she didn't do it. So, I mean, these attorneys were a mess. I mean, obviously, you can't have someone sign your name to a pleading and write a pleading that's a legal secretary, and they forgot to file all this and stuff. So, I mean, the point is that, like, you know, I was trained at a big firm and knew how to practice law at a high level. These insurance defense attorneys didn't. And so you would be, and these were partners and things in their own law in these insurance defense firms. So you will be better at what you do if you're in a big law firm, because it will give you training and details and all that sorts of things. So I would recommend being there for 5 years. You know, it will make you a better attorney. You'll be exposed to bigger cases that require a lot of thought. And then you could take those skills and go into another practice. Say, maybe it's insurance defense, like you go in like I did and just eat these attorneys for dinner. It's very funny, but yeah, so that's my recommendation. It's a good question. Okay, let's say I'm start practicing at 31. Is it possible to still practice until 81? I've heard some firms have a 65-year-old cutoff date. Yeah, so there's some firms that for partners, they have a cutoff date of 65 years old, but when you're 65 and you have clients, like you can take those clients anywhere. The majority of firms do not have a cutoff date. Yeah, lots of people practice well into their 80s. A lot of attorneys never retire. They love it. You know, you can have your own practice, and there's plenty of firms. I placed one guy years ago who was like 82, he had a $3 million book of business. So you can continue practicing as long as you want, just because some firms have that. If you have business, you can move to plenty of different firms. What are the best ways to get business other than word of mouth? So you put yourself out in the legal community and you're seen. That's pretty much it. So word of mouth is not necessarily the most important thing you can do. The biggest piece of advice I can give you about getting business is to become an expert in a practice area, to look like the natural choice for anyone that has that problem in that practice area, meaning you have more authority, more experience, more papers or whatever, you know, that looks like you're good, and then you are seen in the legal market. So how do you be seen? So when I was practicing law, I've told this story before, there was a guy that was the best trainer for people getting business in the country, sold courses and things. But basically what he said is you write down 100 or 200 people that you know, and you stay in contact with them, and they will know that you're an attorney. You just stay in contact with them informally. You send them notes, ask them how they're doing, or call them. It doesn't take a lot of time, but you do that. And then when those people also know 100 people. And so when they know people that have legal problems, you'll get referrals. I did that. And by the time I was a third-year associate, I had, like back then, like $250,000 in business, and probably $500,000 now. And I got that all by connecting with people that I knew from college and law school and asking them how they were doing, and then they knew people with legal problems, and just kind of all built from there. Good question. I'm at a top firm, but the culture isn't open door. It's very hard to get to know people, even though I'm good at that in other settings and environments. Yeah, so let me just see here. Okay, I'm in a top law firm, but the culture is an open door. It's very hard to get to know people, even though I'm good at that in other settings. How do I figure out if I've experienced that in a better environment? So I don't know about you, but I can go into law firms and if I walk into a law firm, and I go into law firms all the time, there's some law firms I'll get in there and I'll just feel very comfortable. I don't know what it is. It's the people, like how they're moving around, talking. And then there's other law firms where I won't feel comfortable. And so if you're not comfortable in the environment you're in, you may not succeed, because these aren't the kind of people or the type of environment that makes you happy. Sometimes people like closed door cultures. Other times they don't, but you have to be in a culture that makes you happy. So I always recommend, like, if you're not happy where you're at, you should be applying to every job in your practice area that you possibly can and going out and interviewing places. It's no different. Why would you marry the first person you go on a date with? Like you might want to explore other people. And so it's the same thing with law firms. If you're uncomfortable in your environment, you can always apply to different places because you're going to succeed if you're in an environment that makes you happy. That's what people do a lot of times when kids apply to colleges. Like my daughter, is going to the University of Chicago, but she got all these different offers from different, applied to all these, she got an early decision, she didn't apply a lot of places, but she, would get all these different things in the mail about different firms and things and our different schools, and all these firms will sell a culture. It's a small college. It's a large college with lots of activities. Like all these different things that law schools will use, colleges will use themselves, and there's just different cultures, and you can succeed in some cultures and not others. Not everyone's going to be comfortable at a school like University of Chicago. They may be more comfortable at University of North Carolina. It just depends on, the type of culture. I've been a defense paralegal for 10 years and I'm applying to law school specifically to become an employment law attorney. How to best translate this without giving the impression of being a dabbler? Well, you're going to law school, so you don't have to decide on your practice area right now. You can figure it out, and no one's going to expect you to do the same practice area you've been doing as a paralegal. So it's good that you're applying to law school. If you want to do employment law, that's good. But, there's 350 plus practice areas. So how could you possibly know at this stage that's what you want to do? Maybe it is. Maybe you want to be a plaintiff's employment attorney or whatever. But, there's nothing wrong with when you go to law school, it's an open book. You can do anything. It doesn't matter. You're not a dabbler because you do a different practice area. Being a paralegal is a completely different profession than being an attorney. So I don't think there's anything to worry about there. Okay, who does most of the talking during an interview? Some say the interviewee should do most of the talking, since people like to talk. Interviewee does most of the talking others say the interviewer should do most of the talking and people like to talk about us. So would this answer the question be different? I think on that part. Okay, good question. I tell this story almost every day, so I'm going to tell you about that. So the answer is, if you do things correctly, the interviewer should be talking 80% of the time. So interviewers should talk 80% of the time. So why is that? I'm talking 80% of the time, because people like to talk about themselves, and most of the time attorneys are in a position where where they're not talking about themselves, and but the interviewer should be talking 80% of the time. So one of my mentors named Jay Abraham, he's a famous marketing guy, and he was on a plane once, and he was flying from Los Angeles to New York, and he was sitting next to a guy, and he's always sitting next to people, and and there's just they don't talk or whatever, and so he decided that he was going to talk to this guy and allow him to do all the talking in the flight. So he just sat back and asked this guy all these questions about himself and his life and his profession. And so for five hours, this guy just talked about himself. And at the end of this, they're getting ready to get off the plane, and the guy handed him his card and said, "This is one of the most interesting conversations I've had in years. I would love to stay in touch and get to know you. You're just one of the most interesting people I've ever met." And how could the guy have been interesting? Because all the other guy did was talk about himself. So it's important for an interviewer to get people talking, to ask engaging questions, to try to get the interviewer to talk. So the interviewer should do most of the talking. If you're talking, people, think about it yourself. If you're like listening to someone who's talking all the time and doesn't have any interest in you, like, you're not going to like them. You're going to want to exit the conversation. I'm sure you know a lot of people like that. So you want to make the interviewer, if you can, you want to make the interviewer talk most of the time. You don't want to ask stupid questions like, what's the work-life balance or things. You would ask them like, what makes people successful in this firm? Like, what would I need to do to be like your top associate after, the first 90 days? And then you just ask questions that show your interest in performance as opposed to things that you want, and then ask the person questions, what do you like about the firm, and things to get them talking. You want people to like you. So the best way to make them like you is to let them talk about themselves or talk about things that they like to talk about. Okay, do you have any suggestions for how people can identify their strengths and what they excel at? It's sometimes difficult for people to view themselves objectively. Okay, so when you go to school, like some people will like math and science, other people will like reading and writing. Some people will like be very good socially, and that is good in school. Some people will be very motivated by helping the poor. Some people will be very motivated by representing the rich. I mean, everybody has different motivations. Some people will be motivated like by the drama of family law. Other people will not want drama. They'll like being a patent attorney or a real estate transactional attorney. You have to think about like what appeals to you. One of the things that I always tell people is like, you should probably be a corporate attorney if you gravitate towards math, science, and accounting and things like that, because those are your skills, and those are very corporate transactional work is very detail oriented and different type of thinking than litigators who typically are good at reading and writing and things like that. So you have to think about where your skills are. Where do you get the best grades in? What do you excel socially? Do you not excel socially? And you just all these different types of things that you have to think about what you're good at and what you like, and where you've gotten the most positive feedback in your life, like where you've gotten rewards for, where you've gotten the best grade and what types of classes, and just think about what you like. I remember when I was in law school, like I would take these tax classes, and I'm not a tax attorney, but I would be just amazed, and I would love it. And I would be literally, when the professors were talking, they would go down these like logic chains, and they might talk for like a half hour about one issue, but I could see like the whole thing unfolding and where it was going to be in 30 minutes. And I had this incredible skill, like just in that particular practice. I didn't get good grades, in constitutional law or property, but that particular type of class, I just understood it instinctively. I probably would have been a tax attorney, but I don't have the people. I have more interesting people. I probably wouldn't have liked it for that, but I understood the subject matter. So what kind of subject matters get you excited? And so for me, if I was to be a tax attorney, I would have been like just great at it. But I mean, I didn't, but I wouldn't have been great in other practice areas. So it just depends on like what you get the most positive feedback. Okay, so this is the last question. So if there's not any other questions, I'm going to make sure I got them all. If there's not any other questions, then this will be the last one. So if you have any extra questions, just ask it right now. Okay, how to work in a place where some people are very competitive and aggressive, and as an introvert, I feel like I have less opportunities. Yeah, so just find another place to work. There's no reason to work in a place where you don't like the people, and you're not going to do well in that kind of environment. So there's no reason to be there anyway. So you are going to have less opportunities in that type of place, and that's not the kind of place that appeals to you. You should look for another job. Everybody should work in an environment where they're happy and where they like to be, because if we don't work in an environment where you're happy and you like the people, you won't do well. All right, well, this is a great webinar. Again, this is one of these topics that if you understand it can change your life. And, I did notice that most people, almost everyone that started this webinar is still on it. And I'm glad that most of the questions were related to the webinar. But just remember, like, you have to do the very, very best in your practice area and the very, very best you can. Doesn't matter the quality of firm you're at, you have to, or what you do. It can be in all sorts of different practice areas, and there's again 350 different practice areas people can practice in. You go to the BCG website, you can look and you can see all these different practice areas. So I highly recommend that the people really focus themselves on being in the best possible in a practice area that most matches your skills and passion, and then you do the best you can. So thanks again, everybody, for being on this. Oh, let me see. Nope, I think it's the last question. Everybody for being on this. I'll be doing another webinar next week. One thing I would also recommend is if you haven't watched any of the resume workshops, fixing your resume is something that can make a profound difference in your career. So I really I see resumes all the time that could be really good, but people don't do it. So watching maybe the last resume workshop would be helpful for you as well. So thanks, everyone, and I will be back next week.